as a priest, you go through a lot of experiences, some pleasant and some very difficult ones. One of the more difficult ones that I recall was something that happened years ago. I was called to go and anoint a dying woman. I knew the woman from the parish, relatively young. She was in her 40s, cancer had gotten the best of her, and she was at home. And, when I arrived at the house, there was a mob of people there in the living room. The dying woman she had been seated on the living room couch. And there were all these people there, family, friends, obviously good people that loved her and cared for her. But it was a chaotic scene. Some were praying the rosary. Some were lamenting loudly. Some were even cursing God, all at the same time. And I could see it was a very disturbing atmosphere, a well-intended one, but a very chaotic one. And I remember seeing the dying woman, and I could tell she was agonizing. She was agonizing because of the pain that she had, and certainly all this commotion was not helping her. And I remember telling the husband, who was a real nice guy, I said, "You got to get all these people out of here." I said, your wife deserves to pass in dignity and peace. And they mean well, but they're not doing her well at all. And he did remove them. He politely did that with just immediate family there. I anointed her. The poor soul was, it's not like flicking a switch that you slip right into peace. I did what I could to try to bring her some sense of peace and a reminder that Jesus was with her, that he would always be with her, and that he would bring her life. And, she passed. I don't remember if it was soon thereafter. I can't remember if it was that evening or the next day, but she passed quickly thereafter. And of course, I am reminded of this because so eerily similar to that passage in today's gospel, which we've heard before, the raising of Jairus' daughter. Jesus encounters there a crowd that means well, a crowd that loves the girl, loves the family, but they're all out of whack, right? Lamenting, mourning, not finding any hope, and believing that they have the full picture. And Jesus naturally does the same thing. Empties the room so that he could, with the immediate family, intimately be with the girl. And of course, he raises her to life. In this case, he raised her back to this life. In the case that I dealt with, she may have done better than Jairus' daughter. He raised her to eternal life. You didn't have to stay here and keep going through this. But this is something that happens constantly in our lives. The noise of the crowd. The noise of the crowd quite often robs us of our peace, quite often robs us of sanity, quite often, although well-intended, quite often is way off from reality. And we experience that in a variety of ways. I would say that, the times we live in, and let me preface it by saying this, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, because what I'm about to mention, there are some redeeming qualities to this. But we just have to learn how to manage it rather than let it manage us. In our day and age, the roar, the noise of the crowd is most prevalent in social media, right? On Instagram, on X, or whatever you call those things, on chats, on whatever seeks to be popular. And usually whatever you get in social media, listen, the people that are posting things and sharing things, by and large, listen, no one's perfect, but they're good people. They're people they mean well. But quite often, all that stuff and the stuff that we put out there, quite often we have to ask ourselves, what good is this really doing anyone? I always listen, like a broken record. I always tell people when they get very upset about what's been put on chats or what's been posted, and I tell them, I said, take it with a grain of salt, because most of the stuff that gets posted, people aren't even necessarily that honest about what they post. For the most part, people post stuff that they think is going to be well received by someone else. They will post what they think others want to hear, whether it's positive or negative or whatever. That's my experience when I deal with people intimately and when they confess the nonsense that they put out there. But the noise of the crowd can be very dangerous. And by the way, again, there are redeeming qualities to social media. There are redeeming qualities to chats. There can be redeeming qualities to even TikTok. There's actually some decent stuff on TikTok. The problem is, as I mentioned, we allow it to manage us rather than we manage it. And the biggest hindrance to it all is that people become so confident that whatever is out there or whatever they're posting is correct. People state stuff so emphatically, believing that they see the full picture when all they see is this, what they want to see. And we are reminded that God sees so much more. And God can provide a life, God can provide possibility that none of us can even begin to see. God is far more creative than we are. God is far more powerful than we are. God is far more life-giving than we are. The problem is that we tend to see life as this. We define life within these little narrow parameters. God sees the fullness of life. Young people in particular, there's nothing harder. You've witnessed it, and maybe some of you have experienced it. There's nothing harder than for a parent to lose a child to death, or, seeing a child go through serious illness. Life doesn't get much harder than that. That's probably, if you're a parent, that is your worst nightmare. And as a priest, certainly I've dealt with that enough. However, you need to be profoundly aware of this. You don't need an accident. You don't need a tragedy. You don't need death, or you don't need cancer or any other kind of condition or illness to begin to lose a child. You can begin to lose a child by allowing that child to get swept away by the noise of the crowd. It's almost like an undertow when you're at the beach and you're swimming in the water and you're having fun and splish splashing, and all of a sudden when you come to it, you're out there in Timbuktu, a million miles from shore, and it gets very complicated to render a rescue operation. We have to be very, very, very vigilant about this and not allow it to manage our children. We have to teach our children to manage it, and we have to do that by beginning to manage it ourselves. That's the pitfall. However, what's the solution? What's the solution? How do we help ourselves, and particularly our young people, from falling into this trap? Gospel gives us the answer. It gives us the answer. Look what Jesus did. Jesus removed the noise of the crowd, and what did he establish? Intimacy with the child. The solution to it all is establishing in our own lives, and in particularly in the lives of our young people, of our kids, greater intimacy with Jesus. It's all about intimacy with Jesus. The greater the intimacy with Jesus, the less prone we're going to be duped, to be swept away with the best of intentions. I often say, and those of you who are here, who have kids here, God bless you. Maybe some of the kids got here today and you had to drag them out of bed, or they got here like I used to get here, when I was growing up, and I didn't want to go to church, and my parents would drag me to church like this. God bless them. Thank God they did that. My ears are all the better for it. But you guys who have kids here, hey, you're getting it done. You're getting it done. When we celebrate our first communions, I always tell the parents, I say, now it's a wonderful, great day, blah, blah, blah. I said, remember, we call this first communion, not last communion, not once in a blue moon communion, not Christmas and Easter communion, not only when I don't have soccer communion. We need more Jesus, less social media. We need more Jesus, more intimacy with Jesus, less chats. We need more intimacy with Jesus, less partying. We need more intimacy with Jesus, less soccer, possibly. And by the way, I played soccer as a kid. I love it. I think it's very valuable. All of these things you gotta party, you gotta play a little soccer, you have to relate to other people, because if not, you go nuts. But we have to do it in orderly fashion, so we don't get swept away. And our young people, those that we're forming for life, aren't swept away by the distortions that people tend to believe in. May this Sunday's gospel help us to reevaluate what it is we're doing in our own lives to establish intimacy with Jesus in a variety of ways. May we grow in it so the Lord can help us to not be steered by the noise of the crowd, and the Lord can raise us to new life that we, and especially the crowd, can't even begin to see.